By this fireside, Netflix's The King reshapes history. It borrows from Shakespeare, it bends truth into theatre. Tonight, we cut through Netflix's The King myths and uncover the true story of Henry V, lit by chronicles, not cinema. The Dauphin's duel at Agincourt, a crafted vision. His knights, in fact, sank in mud under storms of English arrows. I saw Henry V forged in blood, not in taverns. Could you withstand Agincourt's bloody chaos? Stay close. We walk his youth, the sparks of war, the arrow storms of Agincourt, and the uneasy treaty that followed. Picture this. On screen, Netflix gives us a prince sunk in taverns, drifting in drink and laughter, as if he were hiding from the pull of duty. Timothée Chalamet's Hal moves from cup to quarrel, a figure who seems restless and half-formed, his crown still far away. It is the portrait of a youth with no weight on his shoulders. That image has deep roots. Shakespeare gave us a tavern prince, a prodigal Hal, who shirked statecraft for alehouse company. Later writers echoed the same pattern. Yet the chronicles closer to Henry's own time reveal something sharper. They show a boy raised near power, trained early in war and governance, and thrown into battles where stakes were no play. Most striking of all, they record his trial at Shrewsbury. The year was 1403. Henry was only 16 when he stood beside his father's army against rebellious nobles. The clash was no duel on open field, but a full-scale battle, a storm of arrows and steel. In that storm, one arrow cut his life open. It struck his face, drove past bone, and lodged deep. Surgeons with knives and probes that sound barbaric to modern ears painstakingly extracted the iron head. He lived, but the scar stayed with him all his days, carved into his features like a reminder. That scar was more than flesh. Every reflection showed a mark earned not in a tavern but in the press of war. It told him daily that he had survived the edge of death. You can see why later reports describe him as measured, disciplined, already tied to command. He did not have the luxury of forgetting that war had chosen him while still a boy. Shakespeare may have needed the drama of carefree youth turned king, but the chronicles present the counterframe. In them, we see not indulgence, but apprenticeship, marches with soldiers, duties in camp, and the burden of watching men fight and fall. In that contrast lies the truth. The legend gives us a prince of taverns. The record gives us a soldier prince, scarred early, shaped by command and survival. Consider what that meant for his path forward. Each morning, when he faced the world, it was with the memory of Shrewsbury's arrow guiding his choices. The lessons written in his wound would weigh heavier than any jest or song. They set his mind not toward escape, but toward the clarity of action, sharpening his sense of purpose long before the crown touched his brow. And soon that purpose would be tested again, not by idle mockery or drink, but by claims across the Channel that pulled England and France into collision. Now we turn to the spark of war, remembered in legend as the tale of tennis balls. On stage and on screen, it becomes the moment a French prince mocks a young king, a childish jest that drives him to conquest. It is a sharp image, but one born of drama, not of record. In reality, Henry's path to France was planned in council and in parchment. His wars did not rise from insult, but from dynastic claim, policy, and a clear decision to act. The tennis ball is Shakespeare's flourish, not a report in the near-contemporary chronicles, and historians treat it as a dramatic device rather than a dispatch from court. For the audience it stings, for Henry it never happened. How does that prank become a battle in the movie? We'll see at Agincourt. What we do see in the record is Henry pressing his right. At the Great Council of 1414, he argued his inheritance, his rights to French lands, and his claim to stand as heir through Edward III. This was not whim, but deliberation. He sent embassies across the Channel, demands that reached from borders to dowries to the hand of Catherine, daughter of the French king. These were heavy claims, and they were set down as part of policy, not as weapons of mockery. Picture those talks as a hall filled with clerks rather than laughter, wax dripping, quills scratching, every demand entered with care. France, divided between factions, tried to offer terms, a marriage, a dowry of gold, larger Aquitaine, yet still Henry said no. His agenda reached further, toward authority he believed the bloodline owed him. Writers of the age often dressed such quarrels in armor and insult, knights spurred by pride more than treaty. From those stories grew the patterns Shakespeare later shaped for the stage. But strip away the verses, and we find a more patient game. Henry was not triggered in a moment. He laid his case, step by step, until rejection became the ground on which he stood to wage war. Think of it as a chessboard spread across the channel. Every embassy a move, every claim a piece set forward. Henry opened that match with intent, setting the terms and waiting for the inevitable refusal. The insulted youth of the play is a shadow. The sovereign at work here wielded calculation and resolve. And so, when his banners crossed into France, they did not march in reaction to a prince's jest. They followed the line Henry had drawn years before, one that would soon carry men into fields where mud, silence, and storm waited to decide their fate. Picture this: dawn across wet fields, the air heavy with mist, the soil already clinging to boots. Two armies face one another in a tense stillness. No gallant trumpets, no formal challenge, only men waiting for arrows, steel, and exhaustion to come. Netflix shows a duel of princes, polished for spectacle. But Agincourt was no courteous match. It was roughly 6,000 English against a far larger French host. Modern estimates put Henry's force in the low thousands and France's in the tens of thousands, though the exact numbers remain debated. What mattered to those standing shoulder to shoulder was not counting, but the wall of banners closing across the field. Stakes had been hammered deep, bows bent, ready. It was not glory filling the morning air, but dread wound tight. Then the sky broke. Arrows screamed upward, then fell, not one by one, but by storm. Arrows, mud, horses falling, men stacked on men. The French vanguard pushed forward. Cavalry tried to crash the English line, but found sharpened stakes braced in the earth. Longbows cut down horses. The chaos sent them tumbling back into their ranks. Armor dragged at every step in the sodden ground. Those behind pressed into the crush ahead. Knights gasped for breath. Some suffocated where they lay, buried not by earth but by their own companions' weight. The field became a trap sprung by rain and wood. English longbows and sharpened stakes frustrated cavalry charges. Arrows panicked horses. The mud imprisoned armor, and the press of men turned the mass into its own enemy. When the arrows thinned, archers cast aside their bows and joined the killing. Hatchets, knives, mallets struck wherever gaps appeared. The ground turned into a pit of noise and smothering mud. Sir Thomas Erpingham signalled the archers. Tradition records he tossed his staff as a sign, and the fury began. What seemed a thin English line became a rolling wall as bowmen surged forward to fell wounded men-at-arms. It was not the romance of single combat, but relentless attrition. And yet, even amidst victory, danger remained. A French rearguard struck, while the English already held more prisoners than they could guard. Rank and file captives threatened to overwhelm their exhausted keepers. Henry's answer was ruthless, but calculated. He ordered many of the captured common soldiers executed on the field, though high-ranking nobles were spared for ransom. Survival outweighed mercy. Here the truth parts from film. No theatrical duel with the Dauphin, no clean end carried by blade. Agincourt was mud, arrows, and grim decisions. Victory was won by longbows and terrain, not courtly pride. And from that blood-drenched field, the path led not to peace, but to parchments, candles, and vows that would bind kingdoms together. Picture this. Not arrows or mud now, but candles in a great hall, parchments sealed with wax, and a bride whose presence signalled politics as much as ceremony. Agincourt had been fought in 1415, but the peace Henry sought came later. The Treaty of Troy was signed on 21st May 1420, 5 years after the battle, and within weeks, on 2nd June 1420, Henry married Catherine of Valois to seal the accord. The film tightens these years into a single thread, but the rhythm of history was slower, more deliberate. Through that treaty, Henry's ambition seemed fulfilled. He was named heir and regent to Charles VI of France, set to inherit the French crown at the king's death. In words pressed upon vellum, two realms long at war were drawn together. The clause spoke of binding the crowns forevermore, as if ink could hold what steel had tried for a century to win. Catherine's role was central. Her marriage was first and foremost a political bond, a living guarantee of an uneasy peace. Presented as the daughter of France, she became both wife and pledge. To one side, she was a young woman of 20. To the other, she appeared as the bridge that carried legitimacy across the Channel. Romance may settle easily into stories, but in practice, this was diplomacy made flesh. To those present, the stakes appeared immense. If Henry lived long and heirs grew from this union, one dynasty would stretch across France and England together. Imagine two crowns united not by conquest, but by a signed treaty and a shared lineage. It must have seemed a fortress too sturdy to topple. Yet the fortress cracked at the height of triumph. In 1422, barely 2 years after the treaty, Henry V succumbed to dysentery during the siege of Meaux. He was 36. The warrior, scarred by arrow and tempered by victories, died not in the thunder of a charge, but in the fever of a campaign chamber. He left behind Catherine, a widow at 20, and a son scarcely old enough to speak, crowned as Henry VI. The treaty stitched crowns together on paper. Henry's death unraveled the seam. Charles VI of France died within months, and the infant king's double inheritance proved a fragile bond. The Dauphin Charles rejected his disinheritance, claimed the throne, and the long war endured. Instead of unity, Europe entered another cycle of struggle. So ended Henry's design, a king undefeated in battle, yet overtaken by weakness no sword could ward away. His story does not close with a duel or grand charge, but with breath fading in silence, and from that silence, legend begins to gather. At the end, Henry V stands as a scarred warrior from Shrewsbury, a steady commander at Agincourt, felled by fever before his prime. His reign wielded steel in battle and parchment in treaties, half truth, half legend. Hungry for the true Henry V story beyond the king myths? Return here. Sub for Nightly Legends. Comment your favorite medieval battle. And don't forget to like this video to support our channel.